Lately, I've been thinking about and writing about the atheism movement, and I'm working on a little mini documentary. But I happened to rewatch a documentary called Godless in America, and I'll post a link to it in the description. And it's about Madalyn Murray O'Hair, who went to the Supreme Court to challenge prayer in school. She won, and throughout her life she was a vocal atheist, and in my opinion, looking back on a lot of this, she set the tone in many ways. Not only the tone, but also the agenda for the atheist movement. And as I was watching this, I had an observation, and it's not necessarily an original observation, but it's one that you don't really hear people say very often, and that is that atheism as a movement seems to be largely an American movement. Now, on one hand, you have atheism, the lack of a belief in a God. That's a philosophical stance. But in whatever sense we can talk about an atheist movement, it seems to be largely centered around an American cultural and political agenda. Now, that's not to say that there aren't atheists in other places, but rather that in places like Europe, there is so many atheists, and religion is in such a state of decline that it's not as big of an issue. Whereas in America, America is a highly religious country. There's public displays of religion, you know, influencing the government, the word God on the money and the pledge and that sort of thing. And there's something which could potentially give atheists a, you know, a political or social agenda, being it trying to speak up and transform the attitude that makes atheists the most distrusted group in America, or going after things like displays of religion in public space, that sort of thing. That, again, it's not that there aren't atheists elsewhere in the world, it's that as a movement, having a social and political agenda, it seems to be largely defined by America and American politics, American culture. So to look at the current moment of the atheist movement, there are people claiming that there is factionalism which is splitting the movement. But what is really interesting about this is that people often refer to atheism as synonymous with an atheist movement. Again, these aren't necessarily the same thing. You don't have to have any sort of political or social agenda to be an atheist, and atheists in different parts of the world might have different social and political concerns. I do not believe there's any sort of creation museum in Germany. I don't know anywhere in Europe where they're teaching creationism in schools, for example. So again, I mean, it seems largely centered around American political and social concerns, and that's why I find this equivocations flying around and accusations of dogmatism in religion so bothersome. So take, for example, the dreaded atheism plus movement, and it's poisoning atheism and all these sorts of assertions. Well, the only way it could really poison atheism would be if it got people believing in some sort of God. You know, if feminists convinced atheists to start worshiping the goddess. Well, that would be poisoning atheism, because, I mean, people would stop being atheists and start being some sort of theist. But what they mean is that there is an atheist movement and that they're poisoning this movement by derailing its agenda. And yet at the same time, and I'll get back to this in a second, I think atheism plus is, again, part of the overall atheist movement agenda, assuming that we look at it as largely being driven by American political and social concerns and sort of mirroring and trying to counter the religious right. So this idea that atheism plus is somehow creating religion and dogma, if you actually stop and think about it, why these equivocations are so inane, is that all atheists who are part of some sort of atheist movement are a part of an atheism plus movement. So they have their atheism plus advocating for separation in of church and state. Atheism plus combating creationism. Atheism plus promoting science. So they have an orthodoxy about what the atheist movement is supposed to be about. And, you know, atheist concerns are supposed to be these. This is the orthodoxy. And look at over here. There's these people breaching that orthodoxy. So the group calling themselves explicitly Atheism Plus, they say they're atheism plus women's rights, atheism plus gay rights, atheism plus social justice. Now think about it. Who is attacking women's rights, gay rights, social justice? If we look back, many of the early televangelists and evangelical leaders were pro-segregation. For example, Jerry Falwell was pro-segregation and very upset over his Christian schools being desegregated. Okay, there's your social justice. People on the religious right are accusing feminists of destroying the family unit. You know, the gay agenda and the feminist agenda are destroying the family unit and corrupting society, and the religious right is rabidly anti-gay marriage and demonizing homosexuals, teaching that women should be subservient. So if you look at the agenda of the Atheism Plus movement, again, it's sort of a mirroring and a parody, attempt at countering the agenda of the religious right in America. People outside of American society may wonder why the emphasis on these sorts of issues, but when you look at it in terms of American political and social life in general and issues and agendas, then it starts to make sense. This is a reaction to a counter group in American society, and so you have these two groups at odds. So no matter where you look within the so-called atheist movement, you see the markings of American political and social issues, and this entire idea that, you know, people who diverge from orthodox atheist movement agendas are somehow heretical and different sides being accused of dogmatists. I find the entire event to be ridiculous, and these sorts of equivocations about what, you know, this is being religious, this is being dogma, it completely undermines the idea of being opposed to religion to begin with. If religion is just a type of group behavior, then abandon any idea whatsoever that you will ever in a million years, until humanity literally evolves into some other being, eradicate religion if it's simply a matter of group behavior and individuals adhering to the thinking of a group. It's just not going to happen that you'll eliminate religion or dogma when you equivocate them to mean things that are just so broad. Now, personally, in terms of being a part of the atheist movement, well, I certainly do not care for creationists, and I don't believe that children should be forced to pray in school. At a certain point becomes a matter of priorities. Now, whether or not children have to say the word "under God" in school Pledge of Allegiance is, to me, slightly secondary to the fact that our education system is abysmal. I think that we should look at broader, more systemic problems and the major problems of our society. And many of the atheist causes, the atheist movement causes, rank pretty low on the overall agenda of trying to fix our society or the world at large. And so I don't really consider myself all that concerned with being a part of any sort of atheist movement, although I am, as a philosophical point of view, an atheist. And so I think that if anything is splitting the movement or, you know, responsible for the state of the movement, movement, it's that a large number of people sort of had their, and I hate to use this term, but their coming out moment of atheism, because especially in countries like America, atheists are highly distrusted, feel very culturally marginal, and so a large number of people who were atheists stood up and said, you know, we're here, we're a part of society too, we're law-abiding members of society. This isn't some sort of, you know, crazy Satanist cult, we're not evil people, etc., etc., and sort of announce their atheism. And then beyond that, we're not all that motivated to perpetuate any sort of political or social agenda. So you're left with, after those people ebbed away, a kind of core of true believers who have some sort of social and political agenda that they want to advance. Now, if there is anything as such as pure atheism, then again, it's simply merely a philosophical position that you do not believe in any sort of God or gods. And so any sort of movement that is advancing an agenda, assuming we're going to make these kind of equivocations about what it's like to be, what religion means or what dogma means, if we start making those equivocations, then really any sort of atheist movement is a dogmatic religion. You know, supporting science, that's not a part of pure atheism. And that, in a nutshell, is why I find this alleged, you know, breakdown and schisms and factionalism within the movement so ridiculous, because you just can't go around equivocating words like religion that easily without destroying any sort of meaningful sense of what that is, and without also becoming a hypocrite in the process. So I think I've already made my points. Tell me what you think. I'd especially like to hear from European atheists and atheists outside of the United States on their opinion of my idea that the atheism as a movement is largely American. And have a nice day.